When trying a long plank over the curve of the stern, you may find that a gap starts to open up. Adding a dropper to the stern is done in a similar way to the ones fitted and the bow in stage 32. Start by fitting two temporary spaces spanning frames 21 and 23. Try an offcut of plank material in the gap to find out where the gap is exactly one plank wide. Adjust the plank and pin it into position. Take two offcuts of planking material and hold them together side by side. Try them in the gap to find out where it starts to narrow to less than 2 planks wide. Mark this point with a pencil to show where you have to start tapering the planks. Fit the first plank, making sure the end stops at the right frame to keep the stagger pattern correct. The plank in this example runs from frame 18 to 25, but yours may be different. Taper it gently from the mark you made in step 5 to the stern end of the plank where the width needs to fill half the gap. Now glue and pin the plank into position as shown. Taper and fit the continuation plank, which will slightly overlap the frame marked in step 4. The tapered plank should start the same width as the end of the plank fitted in step 6 and taper to 2.5 mm. Leave the plank slightly over length for later trimming. It's a good idea to fit the next plank at the bow to complete the full layer of planking. This will avoid leaving the end of the next plank overhanging when you continue with the next step. Remove the second temporary spacer and fit the plank in a similar way to the previous steps. Remember to stagger the joints so that they end one frame further along. Taper the second continuation plank, leaving it slightly over length as before. Now glue and pin the second continuation plank in place, taking special care not to split the narrow end. Now remove the temporary plank and taper this plank and fit it permanently, trimming the end of the keel. Finally, cut the dropper plank to fit the remaining gap. Take the first plank and hold it in position, making sure you have staggered the joints correctly against the next row. Here the frame marks have been numbered for clarity. This is optional but does help to avoid mistakes. Check the measurements and mark the width required at each frame location. Draw a line joining up the marks into a smooth curve. Then taper the plank. You can use a small modelling plane to remove the bulk of the material, but carry out the final trimming to size with sandpaper. It is better to slightly over trim the plank than leave it too wide. Now glue and pin the plank into place with its tapered edge against the previous planking. Drill any pilot holes in the narrow ends of the portions to prevent the splitting of the wood. Repeat the previous steps to fit all but the last row of planks. By repeating the measuring process, you will automatically correct for any errors that may creep in due to inaccurate measuring or cutting. As planking progresses down the stern, you will need to twist the ends of the planks as they change from following the frames to lying on the surface of the false keel. When the natural run of the stern planking leaves a triangular gap, don't pin the plank in place. Hold the plank firmly in position and mark it in line with the frame nearest to where the gap starts to appear. Fit the plank using a peg or clamp to hold the stern, and then allow the rear end to follow a natural line, but ensure that the gap at the stern is no more than 5 mm. Shape and fit a small steel plank to fill the remaining gap. Refer to the expert tip on page 154 with regards to adding steel planks. When there is only room for one more row of planks, it will become hard to measure the gap accurately, even using a caliper. A pair of dividers is the ideal tool for transferring the dimensions to the plank. Carefully shape the final row of planks to fit the remaining gap. When you slot them in, remember to glue both edges and pin them down. The completed hull planking is now ready for sanding smooth and fitting the external keel.